The latest kerfuffle around the video game social media landscape has now been a few games that were announced at the Game Awards a week or so ago, those being The Witcher 4 and Intergalactic, former by CD Projekt Red and the other by Naughty Dog. Right away, the usual back and forth began, to the point where you just wish someone who was far more balanced than the people doing the arguing, where the terms woke and anti-woke fly around everybody's heads, with everyone else unsure as to what side to take because both sides have such unlikable people within it. And yes, there needs to be a far greater discussion about who is on said sides, which we might have to do here but would be served far better in a deeper dive. But The Witcher 4's trailer is at best polarizing, with Ciri now taking the mantle as the new Witcher. Cue those that have oppositions based upon what they know about the Witcher lore in the books, which the games are based upon. I'm not going to go to specifics right now as it takes some time to explain, but just know that to some, CDPR would have to twist themselves into pretzels to try to make Ciri's ascension make sense. And then there is Intergalactic, and oh man is there ever arguments with this one. We've seen a female with a shaved head, and probably one of the most seen parts of the trailer, her drinking your milkshake like a bald Danielle Plainview. Right away came the accusations that the unnamed woman was ugly, the quote-unquote DEI chin, as a lot tends to now call this. Some have tried to dispel the accusation, with some going as far as to bring up Jack from Mass Effect 2 as a comparison. There was another from someone else that brings up two female protagonists that some in this anti-woke space seem to bring up a lot, and ask what makes them okay but the Intergalactic woman not okay, that being Sarah Connor from the Terminator series and Ellen Ripley from Alien. I'll get to that comparison in just a moment. But first, to the general issue I have with this argument. There's little to no nuance that anyone who is debating this seems to grasp, because every time someone does try to refute the ugly chin crowd, quote unquote, they do the one thing that I feel needs to be debunked immediately, which is that they seem to not realize that the quote-unquote chin is the most noticeable of a much bigger issue about how graphics are done in these games. Though you might not see it as the biggest issue about how a female looks, what about the other possible problems the game will have in how it runs? Or perhaps why females in games cannot be both strong and not look like they downgraded their Unreal Engine. Not every female has a show skin like Stellar Braid's protagonist did, and that's okay if she did, I'm not faulting anybody for doing that, but at the same time, is that the message we want to send to females? That the only way to be strong is to be as unattractive as possible? That you should be so scared of a man finding you attractive that such a body type is the only way to stop the imaginary male gaze? You have to admit there's a trend going on here. But that's not the biggest issue still about that Intergalactic character, as another part of the trailer also revealed something very specific about the lead role that I feel doesn't get addressed enough, because some on the other side of this have gone so far to the fringe on this that they want to silence anyone bringing it up because it's happening so often now. She is unlikable. In the trailer, and your mileage may vary, but I don't think it will, she comes off as severely brash and condescending. This is a problem because this has been the same with all the other cookie-cutter female protagonists we have seen in recent years, including the one in Dustborn. Yes, I'm bringing that game up again, what of it? These characters are severely unlikable from the offset, with no signs that they would ever allow the audience into their psyche to see any weakness or turmoil they ever face, or any hints that they would grow as the game progresses. To be fair, we've only seen a trailer of Intergalactic, but after seeing so many of these types of characters throughout the years, I wouldn't blame anyone for being sus about this one as well. And remember, this is coming from the mind of Neil Druckmann, who has been highly unreliable and highly unlikable as of late to creating compellingly likable characters, male or female. Which circles me back to that one question I left hanging earlier on. Yes, this woman is not modeled in a way that's unjarring, and this is after the actual woman the character was based off is actually a pretty woman, and I say that with much respect as possible. That's another thing we've seen a lot of. Is it a deal breaker? Not necessarily, but let me bring this issue of attractiveness up. Remember when I was bringing someone up about the Connor and Ripley thing? Well, I want to say that this is still safe to bring up those two in the conversation. You see, this is something the media has begun to do a lot of. They have found out that the middle ground, the ones that are getting tired of getting stuck in the middle of the latest of the daily go-rounds between Grums and Airbag on X about everything except the actual issues, are bringing up actual well-written female protagonists, and they are not limited to those two. However, to preserve the narrative that no actual female protagonists exist until now, they have to quell the argument that those that are crying foul at the cookie-cutter, unlikable Mary Sues, I have to call them what they are, that are only there to chase dying trends and earn paychecks for the corporate masters, actually do want to see games be progressive and tackle serious topics and represent all humans of all types equally. No reasonable person is asking for females, LGBTQ+ people, people with different faiths and races, or etc., to be excluded either on screen or behind it. But why are Connor and Ripley celebrated whereas this woman is not? Simple. Remember what I said about the attitude and the vulnerability and the lack thereof of the character that is in this trailer. There are 3 excellent videos that illustrate the point far better than I might hear. One called How to Write a Strong Female Character Who Isn't Toxic and Annoying, and another entitled 7 Signs Your Character is a Mary Sue, both by Abby Emmons, and the other named Badass Ladies Strong Female Characters vs. Mary Sues by Just Judah. These two explain it in more detail than I might be able to here, but the basis of this is this. Connor and Ripley also allow the audience to see their struggles and their faults. Now, as I'm more familiar with the Terminator series and the Alien series, I'll go with that one, though the videos do go into Ripley a bit more than I will here. Sarah has weaknesses that are explored throughout Terminator 2, such as her being way too into the soon-to-come Judgment Day and trying to prevent it, that she forgets her humanity and that she still needs to be a loving mother. In fact, she is so fixated and scared of the imposing fate of the world and trying to stop it, that she believes the only way to stop it is to kill a family man that would have created what would eventually start Skynet in the movie. Not seeing or caring about anything else that he has a wife and kids at home, he was public enemy number 1, and she finally sobers up with John and the T-1000 come in to stop her before she makes a grave mistake. Now, showing that fault alone, that she is too invested in stopping Judgment Day that she forgets any of her humanity, is one of many examples of allowing the audience to view her flaws. There are others, sure, but that is one of my own key reasons and one that I chose to go with. What about other female protagonists that are done well, both in movies, in books, in shows, and in animated shows? One of the videos, the one by Abby Emmons, talks highly of Black Widow in the first Avengers movie, but I'll allow you to hear her own words on that one. She says it so elegantly. I will always defend Metroid Other M to the death because it was the only game that lets us see the vulnerable side of Samus that we usually never got to see. I'm not saying the game is perfect at all, but it didn't deserve the hate it got by any stretch, and I'll someday do a deep dive on why I think that game deserves more love than it gets. Even Jack from ME2 has substantial character development depending on the choices you make to see those scenes throughout the game. And you'll also all know by now one other female protagonist that I think will deserve a mention, Usagi Tsukino or Sailor Moon. She's actually shown as being a scatterbrained emotional female. However, even in the 1992 anime, she seems to hit something that's another trope, the berserk button. If close friends or family are in any danger, she doesn't hesitate to get to work and to put her own well-being off to the side and on the line if it means those she cares about will be safe. All of this is to show that we're not just listing those two that are seen as being oversaid, even though it is very much fine in order to list those two. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. However, I feel like the only reason some are asking to not mention Connor or Ripley is because they want to move the goalposts and to make sure they still have the narrative for when we get cookie cutter characters like whoever this intergalactic person will be. They want to continue making them and try to keep a trend of these types of characters. That's already on life support, by the way, from flatlining. Will these games be any good? And will the fears be unfounded? Time will tell. Notice that I did not mention Witcher 4 as much here because I think that's more of a wait and see issue more than Intergalactic is. Though we do have to do a deeper dive on the updated looks of these female faces. It might be an issue with the graphics engines these games are using, and if that's the case, it should be addressed. But this back and forth and the rush to put everyone into these fringe boxes is not helping anything. Yes, there is an issue with graphics in these games, especially when it comes to female characters. And yes, we should address when the cookie cutter paint by numbers female protagonist is presented to us where we can clearly see where it is going. And yes, we are allowed to criticize those things while still at the same time being progressive and still ask for equal representation in games and game studios. And we can do that without being called a grifter or a fringe woke hipster. Perhaps I have been one that has actually succeeded at exposing the grift. Who are the real grifters I exposed? The corporate elites in AAA companies and firms that do the bare minimum to shoehorn morality where a lecture was never necessary, that continue to think that is what we want when we ask for more diversity. Instead, what we are actually asking for is that we want them to care about those that they are trying to include, and to actually create characters that we can connect to. Do that instead of what we're seeing right now with Intergalactic, and diversity comes naturally instead of seeming forced, like what we have seen in Dustborn and Intergalactic right now. This has been the GGC Soapbox Channel, and as always, to be continued.